Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to embark on a journey like no other. Welcome to the Glum Lot Podcast,
your go-to destination for a unique blend of recovery and discovery.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Mark. And in this podcast, we will endeavor to create a safe and uplifting space for our guests and listeners to share their stories with sincerity and a touch of humor.
Remember, we are not a Glum Lot. The Glum Lot Podcast is more than just a source of entertainment. It's a beacon of hope, proving that even in the darkest moments, recovery is possible. Every story we share carries the power to inspire positive change.
So buckle up, get ready to listen, and join us in discovering the strength that lies within every individual's journey. This is the Glum Lot Podcast, where humor meets hope. Okay, so episode 1, we are off. Brett, what's going on with you?
So, sometimes we get really caught up in ourselves, and usually that's because we've got some problem we're struggling with, right?
Mm-hmm. Or we're just egotistical alkies.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Maybe a little both.
Definitely, and I don't know about you, Mark, but I keep that all bottled up.
Yeah, I don't like to talk about it.
But I definitely don't keep the booze bottled up.
Well, I think that's the important thing. You keep that bottle up, and then you got a starting point, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So one thing that I know I've heard in meetings is a problem shared as a problem halved, and that's why sponsors will tell you to bring up a topic. And I've also heard that joy shared is joy doubled. So don't be afraid to talk about the good things. It's not just all about problems, right?
Right.
So
that's neat. I've never heard that one.
No, really?
No.
Oh, see?
Nope.
I'm good.
But, the statement is true. It's the truth. We, especially as guys, right?
You're right.
I tend to keep things bottled up because I don't want people to know that I might be weak.
Right. Yeah, I don't want anyone seeing my imperfections.
Right. But I do know one thing.
What's that? If
I do get the cojones to talk about it,
yes,
I feel better.
I always do too, but it's getting over that hump, isn't it? It's like, how many times have you gone to a meeting and they ask to bring up a topic and there's silence and you say, boy, I really should bring up whatever's bothering me. But you're like, nah, I'll wait. Maybe, and what I do is I hope somebody else will bring it up, or I hope something will answer my question without me having to put myself out there, because I just don't have the stones to do it.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll see is they'll beat around the bush.
Yeah.
Right? They'll bring something up that's kind of light, but as they talk and as people move on about it, they just seem to... It's a little deeper.
And I was at a meeting the other day and somebody brought up a topic and they said, I'm not thinking about drinking, but...
Oh.
And one of the answers they got from one of the old timers were like, I didn't like the way you said that, not being mean to you, but when somebody says that, the first thing I think of is, this is something that could lead them out, that could lead them to drinking. They're prefacing it by saying, hey, it's not really that big of a problem, but clearly something's on their mind. So I guess the message there is... go ahead and bring it up.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not judged. In fact, in my eyes, you're a better, more sober person for bringing it up. That's how we get better.
And what better place than the fellowship, right?
Exactly.
Everybody's so willing to help. Everybody's so willing to listen. And guess what? They're just like us. So they've got a lot to offer.
I don't know if I'm that
cases.
much like you.
Well,
Hey, we have a great guest today. He is not new, but he has not had a lot of time in the program, under a year. His sobriety thus far has been really great. I've actually known him for years and years and years. Never knew he had a problem with alcohol until I saw him at a meeting. And I was like, what are you doing here? He goes, what are you doing here? And we became fast friends again. And he's a very funny guy. He always has been. Probably better and funnier without the booze. Okay, so you know him.
Yes, I do. Yeah. And I agree. He is funny. There is no doubt about it.
Funny kid. He's a funny guy.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
What better guy to bring in than a funny guy?
And you know what?
What?
I bet you he's got some problems.
I bet you he's got some answers.
Oh, yeah, both.
For both of us.
That's right.
So let's bring in Matt.
Let's do it.
Listeners, welcome Matt. Introduce yourself to the people.
I'm Matt. I'm an alcoholic.
Nice. Okay. So, hey, this is our first podcast, and Brett and I are very excited to have you here. As you know, the podcast is based on recovery and a little bit of humor, and we don't want to get like too crazy, serious. But as we all know, there's a serious side to this whole thing. Most of it is, but we are not a glum lot. People say it at meetings all the time, and in fact, I think I've never laughed harder than at some meetings that some kind of shit just happens, and it's just awesome. Keeps you coming back, right? So we want to start out with a little bit of your story and how you ended up coming into recovery.
Yeah, you want the first time or the second time?
No, let's start at the beginning.
Yeah, so I mean, I got sober for the first time in my early 20s. I had a pretty typical story as far as, started smoking pot and drinking young. In college, that eventually kind of evolved into some more drug use. And, and I know in a lot of AA rooms they say you shouldn't talk about drugs, which I think is kind of...
Well, in this day and age, I would say drugs are more part of everyone's story than not.
And
young people.
And I think for me specifically, I think it's important to mention because, really when I got sober for the first time, it was more of a drug issue. Mm-hmm. And my thought process was if I can put down the drugs, everything else will kind of sort itself out, and then I can go back to drinking. So I was stone cold sober for maybe 2 months, and then, did the marijuana maintenance program for a little bit. And from there, I was like, all right, I'm good. I never went back to the drugs that got me in there. And so I started drinking, and then I ended up getting a job in the beer or the alcohol industry. I started working for a distillery, then got into beer sales, and slowly, I made a decent career for myself. And the more and more I drank, the more I kept getting rewarded for it.
That sounds like such a fantastic gig.
Oh, for an alcoholic, it was great.
I mean, imagine just being that, that guy that's starting to drink,
Right.
and man,
Yeah.
I've got utopia.
And so at what point during your employment in the alcohol business were you starting to think this might be a problem?
I never, you know what? For a long time, I saw it as the exact opposite of a problem. I said, here's a way that I can get paid to hang out in bars.
Yeah.
So at that point in my life, it was anything but a problem. It was the greatest gig on earth.
Yeah. I bartended in college, and it was just, I was drunk every night.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was just like you. I was like, this is working out pretty good for me.
And now in the beginning, it wasn't, obviously, it wasn't as constant drinking as it evolved into. It was really, I could take a few days off here and there, and it wasn't until, 10 years into my career that it really became somewhat of an issue, I would say.
Right. It is a progressive disease.
Yeah.
So.
I shouldn't say that. It was always an issue, but it wasn't a daily issue, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that industry, and, there's plenty of people in the industry that aren't alcoholics. But the fact that I was made me really good at my job.
Right, right.
But did you know it at that point?
I knew. So here's the worst part about getting sober in my early 20s was from there, I had been in enough rooms to where, it wasn't all the time, but once a month there would be that hangover where one of those meetings I went to 10 years ago would kind of pop into my mind. And so I could see the writing on the wall. But I
know when I was in my 20s, I was God, and I could figure it all out.
Yeah, and it was I could see the writing on the wall. But I was single. I got no kids. Excuse me. And so I felt like I wasn't hurting anybody but myself. And it was, for a while it was a good time.
Yeah, I think, there's a point in our active alcoholism where we always feel like I'm probably drinking too much. This is probably a problem, but it's nobody else's problem. It's just me.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, everybody on the outside is looking at you, particularly people like parents or spouses or loved ones, and they're looking at you going, man, this guy has got a problem.
Yeah, but they don't get it.
Well, they don't get it, but they recognize it.
They don't get it.
But I think
Your mom doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Right?
I think a lot of them, there was countless times I had embarrassed family members, embarrassed friends. Obviously there's the one meeting I shared about whipping the guy with a belt in a bar.
Yeah. Right, and you weren't even drinking that night, so.
Oh, I was hammered.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I just want to interject here for a second. For a lot of times in alcoholics' lives, alcohol is an excuse for really, really sick and crazy behavior. Well, I was drunk. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so for me, like when stuff like that would happen, I would just distance myself from the people that it happened around for a long enough time. So like, all right, if I can get drunk around them 2 weeks from now, because then like, oh, he's only doing this once every 2 weeks, and I would find new victims every day.
Right.
Kinda...
You know something? Normal people that never even enters their mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But at the time, with the way this disease is so insidious, is that to us, we think that's kind of normal.
I was a freaking riot, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was completely normal when I was sitting next to a teenager, right? We had a little neighborhood bonfire. And he's sitting next to me with this brand new Under Armour workout pants, so proud and so cocky. So I was like, man, I got a stick in my hand. I love putting that in the fire, watching it glow, and maybe I'll just ruin his day and just kind of burn him. And I sure as heck did that, and that was funny. But, when people thought, there's something wrong with you, I was like, I was just having a good time.
Yeah. Well,
What's
that's the
wrong
same
with
thing
that?
with whipping the guy. And,
It's just, and it's stuff, and I think I've always had this craving and this need to be the center of attention.
I think that's pretty set for alcoholics. You're not alone.
Exactly. And I think I've had it since I was a kid.
And the funny thing now is you actually are the center of attention. For the listeners, Matt is sitting in the center between Brett and I.
And I love it.
And we're giving him all the attention he'd
Exactly.
like. So,
my game plan, actually, I talked to my girlfriend before I came here. She's like, so are you going to be on the show regularly? I'm like, I'm going to wait for it to take off. Let them do the legwork. And then once it gets really popular, I'm going to weasel my way in as a producer.
Wow, we are sick.
We are sick. Why not? So
once the money starts flowing in.
But anyway, so where along the line after? Okay, so you've had a drug problem. You've been to rehab. You've put away the drugs. You've kept alcohol. Maybe smoking a little pot or no?
Smoking a lot of pot every day.
All right.
Every day.
And so that's taken on its own life. So the addiction hasn't ended. It's just switched gears. And like addiction is, it's growing. And so at some point, at what point did it become a thing where you were like, oh my God, I'm here again?
It was probably, like I said it before, I could see it kind of coming, because I was in the rooms before, but it wasn't until there was a brief moment of, oh my God, I can't stop.
Right.
I just can't stop. And then from there, I quickly kind of switched into this mode of acceptance where it's, well,
this is my fate.
God. This is how it is. I'm just gonna be an alcoholic the rest of my life.
Something, and that's part of the disease too. I mean, everybody knows it's a disease that tells us we don't have a disease, but it's also can be a disease that tells us we have a disease, but it's manageable.
Yeah, and
it's not that bad. And I had one bad night, but it'll get better because I remember before it was fun, and it'll be fun again. And then what happens, at least what happened with me, is over the course of time, you just start to get this feeling like, you know what? This is a lie. This is not going to be fun. It's not getting better. I'm drinking alone. I'm drinking when I don't want to. I'm a maintenance drinker. I'm using it like a drug. And still, we deny that.
And I think that was for me, the further it progressed and the further that acceptance that I'm just an alcoholic came, the more I isolated, the more I removed myself, the more I removed myself from a lot of the people around me.
Right. So you start drinking alone. And, Matt sneezed. God bless you, sir.
God damn.
How's that marijuana doing? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I'm
still coughing it up here a year later, or 9 months later.
Like probably everybody, and Brett and I for sure. You go through a period, sometimes a year, sometimes a lifetime, where you kind of just ignore the reality of the hell of addiction. And it either takes you, people say, locked up or covered up, institutions, all that, nonsense. And so you got to a very dark place.
It was very dark, yeah. And especially for me now that my whole career revolves around alcohol. It was, I've been now in the alcohol industry for 12 years. It was all I knew. And so not only was there this fear of knowing that I can't quit, knowing that I can't stop, But there's this fear of when I do stop, what's left for me? Am I going to go back to waiting tables? Which we all know what the restaurant industry is like. Like, what are my other skills? I wasn't a college graduate. I never graduated college. Surprise, surprise.
You know what's a real kind of hidden weapon that addiction uses against us is, well, I can't change this because where will I be?
Yeah,
I'll lose pacifier, essentially.
Yeah.
It's what kept me comfortable and safe and all those things. And I got so dependent on it that even in my darkest times, stinking in a bed, just rotting, I still, even though I knew I was probably struggling with alcoholism, man, I still just hung right on to it.
Yeah.
Still hung on to it.
Right. So, I mean, that's what they talk about, the gift of desperation. And some people don't receive it and they end up, dead. I've known people that have, been like that. And there also comes a point of which you just can't lie to yourself anymore. If you're lucky, it gets to a point where you just can't lie to yourself. So at what point did you make that leap?
It was, 9 months. Well, going on 9 months now. I was in the middle of a 5-day probably bender. And bender being drinking more than I normally would. I was a maintenance drinker. I would, take a shot in the morning to start the day. But we're talking sun up to sundown, just pounding. And it kind of got to that dark place of I got to do something. And I think I called my brother first, and I said, I think I need to go back. And he's like, go back where?
I want to go back to the womb and start from scratch.
Yeah.
I think I screwed my life up.
And I was like, I think I need to go back to rehab. And it was, it was kind of one of those things where, and this was in June, right? This was a week after my 35th birthday.
Right.
And I had a big summer planned. So I think I knew probably earlier that, like January of that year, like, okay, we're gonna have to go to rehab eventually, but I'm looking at the calendar, right?
Let's step on the accelerator until then.
And I'm like, all right, so we've got all these concerts and stuff planned in June. I've got a wedding. That's gonna be really fun. Can't miss that. But then we got football season.
Right.
So and I'm looking at it and I'm like, maybe October would be a good time. October I could sober up. I'll miss.
And you know what's funny is as alcoholics, we don't think that's abnormal while we're active. We don't think it's abnormal. We think most people probably do that, but it just shows you how regimented our life gets around protecting.
Oh, for
that.
sure.
You know what I mean? And so you had that in the back of your mind, but you realize I'm not going to make it that long, right?
Oh, it was. I mean, I don't know if it's age or just the beating I was doing to my body, but the hangovers got worse. They got longer. The only solution for the hangover was to drink more.
Mm-hmm.
And I sold beer, but I really wasn't a beer drinker. I was Wild Turkey 101. I'm pretty sure it's the official bourbon of the alcoholic.
Like the end of the line.
Like that.
But actually, it's kind of expensive. Usually at the very end of the line, it's like boxed wine.
Oh, yeah.
If you get a liter of it, you can get a little bit of a bang for your buck.
But I know this. It's like beer wasn't fast enough. It filled me up too much. I couldn't drink enough of it to get enough alcohol.
But beer is what I kept around to make it look like I was not drinking that heavily, right? So I would bring home a 6-pack and let that sit in the fridge. But what nobody knew was I had a 6-pack in the car. I had, by the way, multiple bottles. And I love how you talked about how we kind of get cheaper in the booze. I mean, if there wasn't remnants of charcoal in my vodka, it probably, it's just sick. But, just trying to make people not realize.
Well,
how
I mean,
far
the
it
bottom
was.
line is, after a while, it doesn't matter. You're not drinking for taste. You're not drinking for quality. I mean, you pretend you are. I built a whole religious thing around it.
Yeah.
We're big on ritual. It's got to be shaken, not stirred.
And
the romance of romancing the drink.
I think I could, and as long as, because like you said, the turkey wasn't a totally bottom shelf bourbon.
No.
So as long as I wasn't buying the $9.99 liter vodka, I was like, people
you were highbrow after all.
If people come to my house and they see a bottle of that sitting on my counter,
You're accomplished.
Then no one's gonna be like, what is this guy's deal?
That's how deluded we get, isn't it? Because meanwhile, everybody that knows you well is thinking, man, Matt has got such a problem. And you're like, well, I've got Wild Turkey. They're going to think. But it's a classy problem.
I lived alone, and I hid bottles. I live alone. I live alone. My parents, when I was in rehab, I called them and I was like, hey, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to go through the house and there's some spots that I need you to clear out. And, you know, and they're like, where should we look?
What should we do with your porn stash?
That's on the next episode.
You guys are old, man. You haven't
I know, right? I know. There's no such, like, my dad used to have Playboys, and it was like a big deal, but now it's like that stuff doesn't exist anymore.
My sidetracked. My dad got me a calendar, like a notebook calendar for Christmas, and I go, what the hell am I going to use this for?
What am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
You open it up, you go, this book has no words in it.
What do you want me to do? I've got everything's on my phone now. Yeah. But anyway, so I call them up and I'm like, they're like, where should we look? I'm like, well, you're going to want to check the nightstand. You're going to want to check my travel bag. You're going to want to check the top shelf above the stove.
The upper deck of the toilet.
Yeah. Right. Oh, I didn't get that bad.
And so at this point, they're thinking, well, we're just going to check everything.
And so I get a phone call, or I call, you know, once you're in there for a week, you get some phone calls. And so I call my dad. And he's like, should I look through the car? I'm like, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah.
2 days later, I talked to him. He's like, I found 2 pints of Evan Williams under the front seat of your car. Did you know they were there? I was like, I absolutely didn't know they were there, because if I did know they were there.
Wait, two pints of what?
Evan Williams.
Evan Williams?
Bourbon.
Yeah. I haven't heard of it. I mean, I haven't drank in over 30 years.
Oh, for $8.
Tons of stuff has come out since I quit drinking.
This has been
coming
around.
straight out of
this Evan Williams has been around.
That's right, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It was coming out of mason jars.
Happy's Moonshine.
Yeah. I just saw you get mad at me.
So anyway, what's that?
I just saw you get mad at me when I said that.
Shut up. I'm not old. You're at this point. You make the call. Were people supportive of you going to rehab? Were they like, yeah, this is not a news flash to us?
You know what? I think a lot of people were surprised. Because I was very conscious of, after going through this the first time, that everybody kind of had a little bit of a different eye towards me, you know? And so family events, I would generally drink a little bit before. So when I got to the family event, I could only have one drink, and I could even turn down a drink if somebody offered it to me.
How quick were you ready to get out of there?
Oh my God, I would be out of there so fast.
Right, I remember when I was still drinking, reading a list of, if you do any of these 10 things, you may have a problem. And one of them was drinking ahead of time so that when you arrive, you got a good base.
Yes,
I always do that.
And so around them, they would be like, oh, he only had one drink. He must be doing okay,
right.
you know? And And I used to think too. I used to lie to myself and say I never drive drunk because I never felt drunk while I was driving.
Yeah, I remember drinking, and if I wasn't blacked out or seeing double, I'm like, well, I'm normal.
Yeah,
I'm fine. But if I got pulled over, I would have blown way over the limit.
I would get crazy anxiety on the highway when I was hungover, and so.
Or you figure you're doing everyone else a safety favor by having a drink.
And so that's exactly kind of how I would say it.
It's like, Matt, keeping the world safe one drink at a time.
Exactly.
That's very noble of you.
And that's one of the biggest things in sobriety that I've noticed is I thought I had just the worst depression in the world, the worst anxiety in the world. And it was, I don't want to say it's gone away completely, but the second I got sober, so much of that stuff went away.
Right.
Well, all those reasons you thought you were anxious and depressed, those were all outside reasons. We look out, the world's against me. People don't understand. All this type of stuff. Work, they don't get it. It's just, sure, I've got depression. We don't think about what you're about to just say.
Yeah.
Right.
And not that.
And so alcohol becomes an answer.
Exactly.
When it's actually the root of a lot of the problem. Probably not all of it, but a lot of it. It certainly exacerbates it.
No, and I
just say exacerbate?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
This is a family podcast.
I know, right? Jeez.
He's exacerbating all over the room right
now. So can you ejaculate a few more words about your experience at rehab?
Just toss it out there.
And then getting out of there.
Yeah, so my experience at rehab, I think, what helped me is, I wasn't there from a nudge from a judge. I wasn't there.
Same.
It was, it was my own decision. I knew, having been there before, I knew what I was in for. Mm-hmm. I knew that it's not the most fun place on earth, but the food was going to be good.
But you knew that you needed it.
And I knew that I needed it. And honestly, my experience at rehab, I'm not going to say was the greatest, but to me, the most important part of rehab is, you get a base. You get to meet some people that are going through the same thing, so you're not feeling so alone while you're in there.
Mm-hmm.
But the best part of rehab is just having 28 days.
Right, a timeout.
Without your phone. You're literally locked in a building. And really just that whole dry out process. Because I think the work happens the second you walk out the door.
Oh, yeah. It's a whole new world. You walk out that door. It's so protected.
I felt bad telling people I was a month sober when I got out of rehab because I'm like, anybody can get locked in a room and stay sober for a month. I wasn't, it wasn't a very happy month.
Yeah, I didn't have a rehab experience. Did you, Brad?
Yeah. Well, I didn't have an actual rehab experience. Mine was, I was in for major depressive disorder.
Okay.
But, when we talk about alcohol as just being the symptom of what's really going on, it was, to me, because I was still thinking about where I was drinking-wise and how I told them, I only drink maybe on a weekend when I was intake. But I knew inside that it was pretty bad, and it was pretty awesome to be in there. It's like heaven. You've got all the resources. Everybody's rooting for you. You're sharing with people that are like-minded, and then you go out that door.
Right. All of a sudden, boom, you're alone.
Oh, there's
so,
life.
The question at that point is how bad you want to stay sober.
Right.
Because you've been given some tools, but left on your own and not going to meetings or not continuing any kind of, fellowship or even, aftercare, you're done, in most cases, I think. I think there are people that do go to rehab that are heavy drinkers, and maybe they're okay after that. I don't know because I've never experienced it. But most of the things that I've, people have talked to me about with the rehab, most people come out and fail.
I mean, I think it's got I don't know the actual percentage, but is it like 12% success rate or something crazy like that?
It's a lot like people that walk into AA meetings. The amount of people that stick around and stay sober for any amount of years is very slim. So, people say that we are the chosen ones, we are the lucky ones. There's something, people call it the grace of God. There's something in us that keeps us coming back. And and that is what makes the difference. Is we come back, we get into the steps, we get into a sponsorship situation, we get into the fellowship, heavily going to meetings and stuff like that. And it becomes a way of life that, I wouldn't say it replaces our alcohol, but it replaces that whole social network we built around alcohol and all that crap in a very, very healthy way. Healthier. I'm healthier in AA than I've ever been in my life.
I tell you, I remember how healthy Matt was. He was so humble when he came in. He was so ready and so willing. And, oh, my God,
And he was just, I keep, and I say to Matt all the time, you are such an alcoholic. and the reason I say that is because he reminds me of me so much.
Well, you know what? And I think, I think the best thing you can do for yourself when you walk into the rooms for the first time is be honest. I've seen so many people come in and 2 weeks in, they're like, oh, this all makes sense. I got this. I'm going to listen to you 100% and, I'm not going to question anything. And in meetings, they can say all this stuff out loud, but in the back of their mind, they're not 100% buying in.
No.
And so that's eventually just going to send them right back out. And so I think one of the things that helped me was, number one, finding people like you guys to surround myself with who, didn't chastise me when I questioned every single move. A little bit.
Oh, yeah. As soon as you left, we did.
Yeah, and that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
I just wanted to be honest.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, that's right.
Well, let's get our airing of grievances out, right? But I think, like, for me, when I came in, I definitely didn't buy in right away. I think it was, I didn't like the God thing. I didn't like, I still struggle with that. I've got my own thing now, and they say, a higher power of your understanding, and that took me a long time to wrap my head around.
That's part of the genius of the program. And the genius of the program, to me, wasn't like, boom, there it is. It was like developed through experimentation and failure, so that these guys knew, okay, you need to have a spiritual experience, but here's the roadblocks. Let's eliminate them.
If I walked into the rooms and obviously we've known each other for a while. We hadn't seen each other in probably 20 years, but when I first walked in, But if you know, after I asked you to be my sponsor, if you started just being like, this is what you have to do, you know, this is the only way, if you really got on me like that, my alcoholic brain is going to go, I'm not doing what the hell anybody says.
You know what? I know enough about me that if somebody did that to me, I would be the exact same way. So, you know, and they say they're suggestions, but damn well betters. But, I mean, they're suggestions, and we hope you follow them because our feeling is, you know, through our experience, is that if you don't, it's going to hurt. And sometimes that's what people need. You need a little more pain. You know, I move at the speed of pain. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not going to do something if it's, you know, doesn't hurt, I'm not going to change it. You know?
100%.
So... and some people are in denial about that too. And you know, there's a million things to trip over early in sobriety. And you know I was at a meeting last night. People started talking about people, places, and things, and that tripped me up for 6 months. The first 6 months I was in. You know, I remember the guys I used to drink with, who I thought were my friends. I was sober maybe 10 days, and they called me up to go out to a bar. And I said, well, you know, I'm not drinking anymore. And they're like, so? To come out and drink soda. They didn't give a shit.
That's the thing with
They
that people,
didn't
places,
care.
and things, though. That pissed me off instantly because now you're telling me I have to give up being around people. If I can't go anywhere anymore.
Yeah.
And if I get involved with a thing, you know, politics, whatever it is, well, I'm destined to be drunk. So what do I do?
Yeah, and that's, you know, now you realize the subtlety of that. That really isn't true.
Well, hang on. Did you drink soda?
I ordered, no, I'll tell you what I did. I ordered a soda.
Yeah.
And within about 2 minutes, everything else around me, it was like a movie. Everything fell away, and there was a tunnel between me and all that booze on the back of the bar. And you talk about wild turkey, there it was. And I knew I was done, man. I knew I was defeated, and I felt bad about it, but I had no choice but to order a drink, and I ended up getting, you know, drunk enough. And I came back the next day and raised my hand and told them myself, and everybody said people, places, and things. That didn't stop me. I still did it 5 more times with different things. But
I think there's certain people, like when you get into the rooms, and I've seen it happen to other people. Thank God it didn't happen with me and you guys. But, you know, when you come in, certain people make the newcomers feel like this has got to be your life. From now on, this is it for the next 35 years. And we've all seen those guys in the rooms.
Well, they're true alcoholics.
They've got 35 years sober, but they don't have anything outside of it. You know, for me, I didn't get sober to not participate in life. I got sober because I hadn't been participating in life because I spent my whole time inside drinking.
That's true.
And, you know, I got sober because I wanted to learn how to participate in the world.
Yeah, and, you know, part of that speak comes from the fact that newcomers put down the drink, and I did this, so I can tell you, you know, firsthand. You put down the drink for a little bit. I mean, I remember when I got my first 30-day chip, I was good to go. And I ended up going on a trip to Atlanta with some guys and who aren't big drinkers. And my sponsor told me not a good idea, and I went anyway. And I ended up getting drunk for 3 days straight, blackout, and that was my last drink. It was so painful. It was something I needed to do, I guess, but when people come in, you know, and people suggest 90 and 90, that's not a bad idea.
No, I did it.
Right.
I did probably 120 and 90,
You know,
to be
you
honest with
say
you.
that. I lived in Atlanta at the time, and I think I saw you passed out on Market, back and forth from the north to the south.
I was the guy on Peachtree, like taking his clothes off at midnight.
And there's
New Year's.
multiple Peachtree, so you were busy.
I'm surprised you were still getting invites from your friends to go
dogs.
places.
Well, you know, funny story. The main guy I went down there with, who I just had lunch with not that long ago. We've been friends for forever. I actually met him through business. He was the first guy that pulled me aside and said, "I'm not going out with you anymore, out at night." You know, I said, well, "What's going on?" He's like, "When you start drinking, everything else doesn't matter, including me. It's just you and drinking.
There it is.
If I don't follow you, you're going to go without me." He said, "I feel like I'm not even there." And that was one of the guys that I went with. And when I was in my drunk, you know, down in Atlanta, he was kind of following me around, making sure I didn't get killed, because there's a couple guys that wanted to beat the crap out of me. I'll tell you why, too, because it was New Year's Eve, and at the stroke of midnight, it was beautiful weather down there. There was a big traffic jam, and I was in the middle of it on foot, and I was reaching my head into cars that were stopped in traffic and yelling Happy New Year and kissing whatever girl was there in the passenger seat. And this dude got out of his car. I think it was his wife that I kissed.
Well,
The guy wanted to kick my ass.
He just didn't understand.
He just didn't understand. Right. You
would have had it coming, to be fair.
Oh, I did. Oh, my God. But the guy I was with was like mortified. And, now that it's been 30-some years. In fact, we were just talking about it when I had lunch with him and laughing about some of this. I'll tell you another funny story.
Here we go. We're talking about
Mark. Here we go.
Matt is our guest. Matt is our guest. But this was just the weirdest thing. It was like him and I went out drinking one night. And this guy was not an alcoholic. He could not keep up with me, nor did he want to try. But he had a pretty good buzz on. And we left my house to go to this other bar that was not too far away. And he drove his car. I drove my car. We were both under the influence. And our idea was we're going to go have a last drink or two. Then he's going to go home. Then I'm going to return home. So, and he could not handle his booze very well. He was not a professional like myself. But I pull up to a red light. And a car pulls up next to me at a red light. Some guy's just sitting in his car. We're waiting for the red light. And I see my friend coming up behind me. And he's coming up to me pretty fast. And he slams into the back of my car. And like crunches the bumper. And the car, jolts forward. And the guy next to me looks at me like, holy shit, dude. That guy just hit you. And I'm thinking, okay, I can't stop because I don't want to get arrested for drunk driving. So I put on my turn signal, took a right, and just drove away. And this guy must have been thinking, what?
Man, this guy's really chill. What a way to handle the situation.
What a nice guy. Boy, he must be in AA because he just lets go.
He just really, yeah.
But, and we get to the bar, and he's like, oh, I'm so sorry I hit your car. But I'm like, oh, no big deal. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't be that cool about it, I don't think.
Well, I was drunk, so, everything worked out. So you get into AA, right? And you're done with rehab. You're starting this new life. And how did you feel about the first 3 steps?
I had opinions.
Okay,
I think so. The first one I thought was easy. The first one, admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. That, I could have done that 2 years ago. I mean, That was, that when a lot of people say the first step was the hardest, I had no problem admitting it because I knew I had admitted it before I even came into the rooms, before I even went to rehab. But I had admitted it in a different way. I admitted it in a way of, I'm an alcoholic, my life's unmanageable, and that's just the way it's going to be the rest of my life.
Right. Right. So my life's unmanageable, but I'm going to manage with it.
Yeah, and I do in a fucked up way. I kind of do miss that chaos a little bit.
Of course, yeah. We were all the chaos was all part of the
I'm
package.
back in therapy now, and she I just went back for the first time on Friday, and she asked me, she's like, "Is there anything about it you miss?" Because she knew me when I was still drinking, and I said, "It's just I miss that feeling of being able to just go out and being like, I don't know what's gonna happen.
That's
tonight.
part of the romanticization.
I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know where we're gonna wake up. I don't know where we're gonna end up.
Right.
I don't know who I'm gonna be with. But
and what's funny is we look at that as like a good thing.
And now it's like I know exactly where I'm gonna end up.
Yeah.
And it's probably gonna be in bed by 10 o'clock.
Right. And the funny thing is, our alcoholic brain selectively remembers the times we went out like that and hooked up with good-looking girls or ended up getting something out of it. We push aside, arrests. I never got arrested, but a lot of people do. Arrests, broken relationships, money problems, just losing a job, not getting up the next. There's so much that our alcoholic brain just says, yeah, but remember that one time, you know what I mean? That's part of the sickness.
I'm romanticizing the idea of waking up on a floor, and not the feeling I feel when my back is killing me the next morning. I'm hungover, I'm dehydrated. But that's why I need the meetings, because I've got such a short memory when it comes to that stuff.
Exactly.
And I need to be constantly reminded. I love when newcomers come in,
Sure.
And I don't love that they have to come in, but you just see the look on their face, and it's just a constant reminder that of where I'm at now, of how much farther I have to go.
Fresh,
yeah.
So another, so then we get to steps 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So tell us what happened there.
I mean, you were there.
I want you to tell the listeners.
Yeah. So 2 and 3, obviously, I was a room guy. They say group of drunks, GOD, that stuff. I'm still not 100%. into the God thing. Obviously, I've made it work for me. I don't say the Lord's Prayer at the end of meetings. I despise it, as a matter of fact, which that might be a little blasphemous to say.
Well,
but,
you know what, though? Fourth and fifth step, to be honest, my first thing on my fourth step was contempt for organized religion.
Yeah.
Because I had that. I don't.
So common.
Right, it is very common. And I don't really have that anymore. And, it's one thing I've been able to overcome for the most part. I don't agree with a lot of the dogma and stuff in religion.
But a lot of that
to
came
me,
from humans.
It did. It all came from humans.
Personalities.
And you know what? And the thing is, am I going to let my bad experience or opinions about organized religion interfere with my spirituality?
Yeah.
I'm not. And that's kind of the happy medium I've come to with those things.
You know what happened for me is when I was around some of those people that just made me skin crawl, right? When they'd start talking, well, you got to give it to God. Oh, really? But there was something. There was something about that person. Man, did they have some peace in their life and joy and stuff? And why is that, right? Because this person that I'm envisioning is just, everything I do was wrong. I should feel bad about everything. And, God have any kind of pleasure? No, that's sin. You know?
Our concept of God has got to be our own, and it's got to be like a loving, helping, and a lot of people have to overcome a past that is based on religion of judging God and hell and all that stuff, and also not only that, but a scientific belief that. In evolution and all these different things. Yeah. And so it's for a lot of people, it's a lot to overcome. Some people have an easier time and some have a tough time.
I do want to throw a disclaimer out there. I mean, this is just me. You know what I mean?
Sure.
This is something that works. There's tons of people, and it works for them. And I think that that's great that it works for them. I'm jealous of a lot of those people, to be honest with you, because I can't imagine what it feels like to come in and feel that connection so instantly.
Yeah, and some people say they do,
and
and some people don't, and some people work on it for the rest of their life.
Exactly, and for me, this whole thing has been a slow burn.
Yeah.
I haven't had a burning bush moment. A lot of people say they have, they can pinpoint one point where God talked to them, or and to me, it's been so many small things.
That's the way I am
kind of
too.
building up, and then in like we've worked together and kind of developing this own concept of everything's connected, and and I can buy into that. And so for me, it came to the second step. When it comes to everything being connected, my higher power speaks loudest in the rooms. Mm-hmm. And I can get behind that. I can say, hey, here's a bunch of people who have, 20, 30, 40 years of sobriety, and they figured it out. And so my willingness came from the willingness to listen to them and to take direction. I wasn't always great at it, but I was always honest about it. And I think that's what had helped me, and I think that's what's helped me the most. There was that situation where I went to that concert. Remember? And I told you, I called you up. I said, hey, I think I'm going to go to this concert after the meeting. And you were like, where's the concert? And I was like, well, it's at Middle Ages Brewery.
It's at a brewery.
It's at a brewery.
I'm like, oh, that's fantastic.
Or it's at any brewery. It doesn't have to be, I don't know if we're giving free press to
No.
But, and you were like, I don't think that's a great idea. And I sat through the meeting. I thought about it, and I was like, I'm just going to go. He's not going to know if I go. How's he going to know? And after the meeting, I decided to come up to you and be like, hey, just so you know, I think I'm going to go to that concert.
And I appreciated your honesty.
And you said, all right, well, call me if you need anything. Call me when you get done, and good luck, basically. And, I think having that accountability is what helped me get through situations like that. I did have fun at the concert until, there's drunk people stumbling. 2 hours in, now I've got drunk guys stumbling into me. I'm looking around, and all of a sudden, that whole world that I used to be so ingrained in became so annoying.
Yeah. And you know what? Sobriety to me, along my journey, is a million little things. Mm-hmm. It's a million little things. And you can't, if somebody says, how do I get sober? I can point them in the right direction. I can tell them my experience, strength, and hope. But it's something you got to experience for yourself. And it is a million little things along the way. It's one line you hear at a meeting. It's something you talk about on the phone with somebody. It's you talking to a newcomer. It's reading the literature. There's a million things,
Even just walking in and seeing you at I think it was my second meeting out of rehab.
Talk about a higher power.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, you think so.
The lower power.
Mark
maybe.
thinks he's the higher
power.
Right.
Stop. Consensus, buddy.
Don't puff up my ego. It's very easy to do.
See, and you took that as us puffing up your ego.
Yeah.
That's enough.
Yeah, no, that was a dig. With step 2, for me on these things, it was always me just saying, I have to ask why, right? What is the point of believing in something other greater than ourselves? What do you think that is? Why do we have to do that?
Because we've been so obsessed with self for so long.
Right, and because we're powerless.
We're God.
Yeah.
The reality,
Running the show.
It's funny, but when you're drinking, the reality doesn't hit you. It's almost like I'm drinking because I don't want reality. But, eventually you have to come to terms with that as a sober person, that I am pretty powerless over just about everything. Other people, I can have some influence over some things. I can definitely have influence over my actions and what I say. But if I can make this connection with a higher power, people find out it can work for them. Like they work with it, and they start to see it, and you really see it at meetings when other people talk about it. And so it doesn't have to be defined. That's my whole take on it. Is you can't define it. It's too big. It's too much. So you're asked in AA to define it to yourself. And then that third step, when I first read that seemed like a big ask. Turn our lives,
It is a big ask.
Over to the care of God, But, honestly, that's what's happening anyway. So it's almost like you're saying, hey, your choice here is to either go along with reality or don't go along with reality. See what's going to work for you.
It was right around this step that I decided I could rewrite these. I could. I think I could do some edits to this and make it make sense. You know what I mean?
Of course. I mean, when I came in, there was the big book, and I was going to write the bigger book.
Yes. And but no, I think it goes back to step 2 is, and once you get into the 12 and 12, it does break it down a little bit more. My conversations with you have kind of broken it down a little bit more to where I've always viewed God as this entity in the sky with his picture on the wall of the church, and he's got a beard, and he's white, but he lived in Jerusalem or something like that, which doesn't make any sense.
My God had a sweet goatee.
Yeah, and so I couldn't wrap my head around that. But the rooms and the group of drunks, I could turn my will and my life over to the care of the people in these rooms who cared about me from the moment I walked in.
And the experience they had.
And the experience they had, and I could use that until I got to the point where I figured out my own concept of what's out there, how is everything connected.
What was going to work for you. So let's begin to wrap things up, and I just wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to someone who was either thinking about dealing with their problem with alcohol by coming to meetings or whatever, or seeking some kind of help? Or what would you tell a newcomer?
I mean, I think that for most of us, the drinking isn't the problem. It's the solution. And you're not going to get down to the solution until you put the drink down. I know for me, I am still an alcoholic through and through. I don't drink anymore, but my stomach is hurt all day because I was full after 2 tacos yesterday, yet I had 4 tacos, an enchilada, and a slice of cheesecake.
You still have an addictive personality.
I think we're all just out here looking for a way to
feel good,
and to escape and to get outside, to shut our minds down. At least for me, I just wanted to shut my mind down, and putting the drink down will be a great catalyst to start to work on the rest of those things.
So you can't get sober while you're drinking.
You can't get sober while you're drinking.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I guess the advice would be there is, show up. What's the worst case scenario?
Keep coming back.
Yeah. It's an hour a day.
Yeah.
It's free.
It's free.
I mean, and so
give yourself a chance.
They say people don't walk into the rooms by accident, you know?
Right.
And I don't think, I'm not one of those people that believes every single person that walks in the room might be an alcoholic. But, if you can walk into the room and you can find somebody and you can relate to even one thing somebody says, you're probably in the right spot,
Yep.
And I think just making that step of walking into the room or calling the rehab center or, whatever it might be, I think you just have to start it. Because once you start it, it kind of gets the ball rolling. I don't know. This is terrible advice. I'm not an advice guy.
Well, you know, hey, all
we
can
don't
do,
give
listen,
advice.
listen,
I don't know.
We don't give advice.
We
It's
don't
just,
give advice.
We share our experience, strength, and hope, and that was your experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's my experience. My experience would be don't do exactly as I did. But, you know, I think it's really figure out what works for you. You know, when you come to these rooms, there's a lot of different personalities, a lot of different people. You're going to hear a lot of stuff you like. You might hear some stuff you don't like. But at the end of the day, figure out what works for you. And you know, create your own higher power. I don't know. Cut it.
Ah, you're absolutely right, though. But I will tell you this.
Matt wants us to edit this out, but it's so real.
But I'll tell you this. You know, you may not think what you're saying is enough, right? We're guilty of that. But I can tell you, if I was somebody brand new in the rooms and you're telling me that, you know, this place is full of people just like you, and that if you just, all you have to do is be willing to stop drinking and show up, that you will find some things that will motivate you to do better.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's wonderful advice. It may not be the perfect advice, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to let that person know.
Well, I wanted Matt to give like a one-line perfect thing that would cure. It was a cure-all.
Just to cure. Yeah. Want me to cure alcoholism?
Yeah. Well, you know, I want to cure your own alcoholism. That's what we're all working for.
That's a different podcast.
So we, on behalf of Brett and I, we would like to thank you for being episode number 1.
Yeah.
You were a fantastic guest, and who knows, we may have you back someday.
I told you, once this thing takes off and the sponsor dollars start rolling in, I'm going to find a way to weasel my way in.
Right. The only sponsors we're going to get are our own sponsors.
There you go.
All right. So thank you again, listener, for coming to the Glum Lot Podcast. We've got many more episodes to go. I'm Mark.
I'm Brett.
And you're Matt. As we wrap up another episode of the Glum Lot Podcast, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who tuned in today. Navigating the path to recovery from alcohol and other substances is a journey filled with challenges, triumphs, and self-discovery. Remember, we're not affiliated with Alcoholics Anonymous, but we're here to provide a safe space for open conversations about the complexities of recovery. Your stories, courage, and resilience inspire us and our listeners alike. If you or someone you know is on the transformative journey, know that you're not alone. Join us next time as we continue to explore the diverse facets of recovery. Until then, stay strong, stay connected, and remember that each day is a step towards a brighter, sober tomorrow. Thank you for being part of the Glum Lot community.